we have a major new release from Selmer Paris in the form of this new alto piece, the Jazz Flow mouthpiece. I'm going to let you into a little secret right now. This is a great new mouthpiece. So what's it all about? Well, it seems there's been some demand by sax players all over recently for Selmer to produce another great jazz mouthpiece, because I think it's fair to say that over recent decades, they've really made a name for themselves producing high quality and well-recognized classical mouthpieces. But we actually have to wind back quite a few decades before we recognize those jazz mouthpieces in the past that Selmer have made. For example, the short shank soloist would be one. And so with this mouthpiece here, they clearly are laying their cards on the table by labeling it Jazz Flow. So today I'm going to get inside this mouthpiece. Well, not literally, that would be ridiculous.
Hello.
And I'm going to explain exactly the meaning behind it all. I'm going to put it to the test. I'm going to compare it with a Selmer S80 mouthpiece. Just because that is such an opposing style of mouthpiece, it would be great to see how the two contrast against each other. And I'm also going to compare it with my trusty old Meyer mouthpiece. So let's get into it, see what we think. So Selmer tell us that there are two sources of inspiration for this particular mouthpiece. So Jazz Flow, the word flow meaning spontaneity and fluidity in improvisation. And secondly, they're actually referencing a mouthpiece design that goes way back to the 1920s called the Airflow. And I kind of get the feeling with Selmer that of late, with all of their other recent releases like the Signature and the Supreme, that they are kind of winding back the years and trying to pay respect to some of that classic work that they produced in the past. And I think it's the same thing with this mouthpiece. Now, I would describe it as a contemporary piece. Well, in fact, Selmer describe it as a contemporary piece, suitable for sort of jazz styles, pop, electro, funk, world music, those kind of styles. And also note that at the moment it's only available for alto saxophone and in two tip openings, the 5 and the 7. You might think, well, where's the 6 in all of this? I think they just feel that the 5 and 7 do everything that they need it to do, so there's no need to kind of confuse things, muddy the waters by producing further tip openings. Looking at the mouthpiece in more detail, we can see how beautifully finished the mouthpiece is. Selmer produce all of their mouthpieces on state-of-the-art CNC machines, and they're all hand finished. And on the back of the mouthpiece, we can see the gold embossing going on here with their brand logo, and then on the side we can see the model Jazz Flow there. And looking at the internals of the mouthpiece, we can see it's a fairly straight cut all the way through, with kind of scooped and rounded inner walls as it moves into the chamber, which is a rounded chamber in contrast to the square chamber that we have on the S80 mouthpiece. So let's delve straight in and do a comparison between this and the well-known Selmer S80 mouthpiece. So before I get going on this, just a word of explanation as to why I've chosen an S80 as a mouthpiece to compare with the new Jazz Flow. So the S80, it's such a well-known mouthpiece. Selmer make quite a few models, but I suppose the S80 is at the top of the list in terms of the fame factor. And even though you could argue that by and large the S80 is more of a classical oriented mouthpiece, Certainly, it really works well in that idiom when you have a closer tip opening like the C star or the C double star with a harder reed. We also find that this mouthpiece can be adopted by players in general when they're just looking to upgrade from that basic plastic mouthpiece. So it's such a well-known mouthpiece, it just seems like a good idea to compare that one with this new jazz mouthpiece, which is certainly much more of a jazz mouthpiece. Obviously, they're labeling it as such. So that's the reason for the comparison. Now, in terms of how I assess the two when I compare them, I really find the Jazz Flow suits me very nicely. I just love the vibrancy in the sound. It's labeled flow, and you can see why they call it flow, because the sound does just flow. It's so responsive. My immediate response to this mouthpiece is the response. The sound just absolutely oozes out, which makes it a joy to play because the sound just keeps coming. You can push it and the sound opens out, becomes really ripe and bright, and when you lay it back, you get this kind of softer side to it, and there's a smokiness in there, there's a core to it, there's a depth, there's all sorts of sound qualities that you can explore in it that just really personally kind of vibes with me. On the S80 side of things, I find that mouthpiece, it's a quality mouthpiece, but it has more of a precision to it. And you can see why within that darker sound, when you apply a harder reed, of course, I'm just using the same reed here, my standard Select Jazz 3 soft, I think it is today. I find that with the S80, it really does work well in those more specific environments when you have the right reed, that slightly harder reed, and you play in more of the classical style or a crossover style. That's when it really comes into its own. So overall, for me, I'm absolutely loving the Jazz Flow. I can see that this has got a great future with Selmer, and it really does stand out as being quite a contrasting mouthpiece in comparison to the other Selmer mouthpieces available. You know, we think of the other models, the S90, the Super Session, and so forth. But it really is doing something quite different. So I think this is a bit of a landmark moment for Selmer. Now let's move on and compare it with my own Meyer mouthpiece, because I think we're going to find that the results are much more similar when we compare the two mouthpieces. You've just heard me playing both mouthpieces. This is my trusted old Meyer, and the question is, should I sell the Meyer and now get a Jazz Flow? I don't know. I'm finding them both brilliant in their own right. There are so many similarities between these mouthpieces, and they both do the kind of things that I like to do as a sax player, you know, playing that contemporary jazz style with a lot of presence in the sound, a lot of highs in there. But I feel they both have quality throughout the spectrum, you know, the lows, the mids, and what have you. I would say in terms of the resistance factor, the Jazz Flow really does win. The sound just oozes out. There's a little bit more of a kind of push feeling with the Meyer, which I do also really appreciate. So for me, when I play on the Flow, I'm loving it. Then I move to the Meyer and immediately I think, oh, I just need to adapt to this, push a little bit more, and then it settles down. I find that sweet spot on the Meyer. So I'm finding just tone-wise, they're both sounding great, perhaps a few more highs in the Jazz Flow. You know, it really does kind of kick out in the high end of the frequencies. By making this comparison to my own Meyer, it shows that I really hold this mouthpiece in high regard, because it's not often that I find another mouthpiece that I think kind of matches or is on a par with my trusted old Meyer. So I'm very happy to say that I do thoroughly endorse Selmer's work. I think they've produced a fantastic mouthpiece here, but really interested to see how it goes and how it's taken up by the general public. So obviously, as saxophone specialists here at Sax, we are going to be stocking this mouthpiece in both of the tip openings. So please step on down to the store. We will always have these in stock, certainly do our best, or you can of course order online. But otherwise, that's it for me from another video at Sax, and I hope to see you in a future video very soon.